Wind clawed at the high plains as if it wanted to peel the world open. Dust rolled across the empty stretch of land, slithering like restless spirits. And there, at the center of it, stood Ethan Calderline, quiet, shoulders squared against a storm he hadn't asked for. Most men feared gun barrels, wolves, or tribal war cries. Ethan feared something simpler. A woman standing in front of his cabin with grief in her eyes. Anne, Apache widow, and the words she'd spoken in a voice soft enough to bruise. You want a wife, or just shelter? The question hung in the air like a noose in the courthouse square, still, heavy, waiting for the drop. But let's go back to where it all started. Back before the widow, before the storm, before a question that could ruin a man in the eyes of two nations. The sun had barely risen on Calder Ridge when Ethan rode out that morning. The land was waking slow, stretching under the pale light, the way a tired horse might rise from cold dirt. His small ranch sat near the river bend, far enough from town that people forgot he lived there, close enough that gossip could still reach him like a thrown stone. And gossip always did. They called him the man who turned down every woman, though he tried to ignore how carelessly people spoke his name. Women in town had offered him pies, glances, church invitations, some with honest hearts, some chasing his land. He refused all of them the same way, quiet, polite, distant. They didn't know the reason. He never gave one. Some men carry shame like a rifle. Ethan carried his like a shadow, ever seen outright, but always touching his heel. The river was low that morning, its surface glassy and unmoving. Ethan knelt, splashed his face, and whispered the same prayer he always did. Not for himself, for someone he had failed. Someone gone more than 10 years, someone whose absence kept him living half a life. Hoofbeats cracked the stillness. Not fast, not urgent, but deliberate. Ethan straightened slowly, hand drifting near the butt of his revolver, not touching it, just knowing where it lived. When he turned, he saw her, a woman riding bareback, wrapped in a worn doeskin shawl, dark hair trailing like a river of night, her posture straight, regal even in exhaustion. Her horse trembled beneath her as though they had outrun ghosts. Her eyes were what stopped Ethan's breath, deep black, swollen with grief, rimmed by dust from miles of hard travel. Apache, but alone. She dismounted without grace, knees buckling, one hand gripping the saddle horn to stay upright. Ethan stepped forward instinctively, but she lifted a hand, stopping him with surprising force. I did not come to beg, she said first. Her English was soft, accented, carrying the rhythm of someone who learned each word by listening closely. Ethan nodded once, not trusting his voice. She reached into the folds of her shawl and pulled out something wrapped in rawhide. She held it out to him, trembling. My husband is dead. The words cracked like dry wood breaking under weight. Ethan blinked slowly, letting the silence settle. She didn't weep. Apache women rarely did where others could see, but pain radiated off her, like heat from branding iron. War party? He asked. Her jaw tightened. Soldiers. A long breath fell between them. He knew what that meant. A widow with no clan, no safety. The army didn't ask if they'd taken someone's husband by mistake. They didn't return, but they didn't care what happened to the families left behind. The rawhide bundle slipped from her fingers. Ethan caught it before it hit the dirt. Inside was a small carved figure, cedar, smoothed by hands who loved deeply. A man and woman standing back to back, hair intertwined. A marriage carving. Apache tradition. Ethan closed it gently. What do you need? He asked. She lifted her chin, unbroken, though everything inside her was shattered. I need shelter for the winter. A pause. I need a place where no man will claim me by force. Another pause. And I need to ask you something. Ethan swallowed. Ask. She stepped closer, so close the dust from her shawl brushed his shirt. You want a wife? Her voice was a whisper, carved from pain and defiance. Or just shelter? The river behind them went silent. Even the wind seemed to kneel. Ethan felt something stir inside him. Old, buried, dangerous. A question that could get him killed by soldiers, or hunted by her people, or despised by the town that barely tolerated him. Already he didn't answer. Not yet, but the world was already shifting around him, waiting for his choice, and far off in the hills, a distant drumbeat began to thrum, a warning, or a promise. Either way, nothing would be simple again. For a long moment, Ethan just stood there, feeling the weight of her question sit on his chest like a stone. The Apache widow didn't waver. She held his gaze with the calm steadiness of someone who had already lost everything worth fearing. Behind her, the dawn pushed over the ridge, setting her silhouette in pale gold. Her horse snorted weakly, ribs visible beneath its hide. She had clearly ridden through the night, through danger, through grief. Ethan finally spoke, voice low. "What's your name?" Her chin lifted a fraction, as if bracing for judgment. "Nayeli," he repeated it gently. "Nayeli, you should come inside. You need rest." "I need an answer," she replied. Silence again, heavy, but not hostile. Ethan motioned toward the cabin, inside first. Nayeli studied him for a breath, measuring, calculating, searching for deception. Then she nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and followed him across the yard. The wooden floor creaked under her steps as she entered. She removed her shawl, folding it neatly, an act of respect, even in a stranger's home. Ethan watched her, noticing the bruises on her wrists, the dried blood on her knuckles, the way she held her ribs, like something inside was broken. He reached for the kettle, poured water into a tin cup, and set it on the table between them. Her eyes flicked to it, then to him, as if acknowledging that kindness could be dangerous. "Drink," he said. She did slowly, hands trembling, and then the world outside erupted. HOOFBEATS. Fast, angry, a cluster of them kicking dust like a small storm. Ethan stiffened. Nayeli's hand drifted to the small knife hidden by her belt. Instinctive, silent. Ethan moved to the window. Riders, 5 of them, neighbors, men from town. Men who never cared to come out this far unless trouble gave them a reason. At the front rode Hank Braddock, a heavy-shouldered man with small eyes and a mouth that always seemed caught between a sneer and a smirk. The kind of man who believed authority came naturally to whoever shouted first. Ethan's jaw clenched. He stepped outside, closing the cabin door behind him. Braddock didn't bother with greetings. "Heard you had company," he said, spitting into the dirt. "An Apache woman riding through Calder Ridge this early. Folks get curious." Ethan didn't respond. Another rider, a younger man named Cole Harris, eyed the cabin nervously. "We just want to know what she's doing here. Calder ain't safe. Not with the soldiers stirring up trouble in the mountains." Braddock leaned forward on his saddle. "You know how these things go, Ethan. A lone Apache shows up. That means more are watching, maybe scouting, maybe setting up something ugly." Ethan's voice stayed calm. "She's tired. That's all." "Is that what she told you?" Braddock scoffed. "Or is she angling for something?" "They always are." Ethan's hands curled at his sides. "You be careful," Cole added. "People in town ain't gonna like you harboring one of them. You know the stories." Ethan looked at the men. Ranchers, men who preached about danger while holding rifles they'd never fired in real fear. "Go home," he said quietly. "She's not a threat." Braddock's face twisted. "She's Apache, Calder. That alone's a threat." Ethan stepped closer to the horses, slow, controlled. "Let me say it plain. She's staying a while. She's safe here. You ride home. Now." Braddock opened his mouth, but something in Ethan's expression made him rethink whatever was about to come out. His jaw clicked shut. "You're making a mistake," Braddock muttered. Ethan didn't blink. "I'll live with it." The riders hesitated, then turned their horses, kicking dust over the fence line as they left. Ethan waited until the hoofbeats faded before returning to the cabin. Nayeli stood in the doorway, knife still hidden in her palm. "They come for me?" she asked. "They came to threaten me." She looked at him in a way she hadn't before, less guarded, more aware. "You choose trouble," she said softly. "No," Ethan said. "I chose you." The words surprised them both. Nayeli's fingers loosened around the knife. She stepped back inside, her voice quieter now. "Then choose fully," she whispered. "Wife or shelter." Ethan didn't answer, not because he didn't know, but because the world outside had already heard enough of his choices for one morning. He glanced toward the far hills. Smoke rose in thin threads, not from riders, from signal fires. Nayeli noticed them too. Her breath stilled. "I told you," she murmured. "No Apache woman rides alone." The moral choice he made that morning had already begun shifting the land around him, and danger was coming fast. The signal fires weren't large thin trails of smoke rising like fingers from the distant ridge, but Nayeli saw them before Ethan fully recognized what he was looking at. She stiffened, her breath catching like she'd just stepped on a rattlesnake. "They know where I am," she murmured. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Your people." She didn't answer right away. She moved past him, stepping onto the porch, staring at the lines of smoke, as if reading a message carried in each shifting thread. They are not soldiers, she finally said. They do not search blindly. They search with purpose. Ethan closed the cabin door halfway behind him, as though keeping the world out would slow whatever was coming. You think they followed you? They follow news, she replied. My husband was a war scout, a man of respect. When a respected man dies by soldiers' hands, she paused, words tight. The clan wants answers. They want to know who sheltered his widow, who holds her carving. Ethan felt the rawhide bundle in his coat pocket, its weight strangely alive. They want proof you're safe. No, she whispered. They want proof I was not taken. The difference hung heavy between them. A lone Apache woman riding to a white man's ranch. Too many. That wouldn't look like survival. It would look like captivity, shame, a reason for vengeance. Ethan watched the smoke a long moment. The sky above it pulsed faintly, heat shimmering where distant hooves churned up the land. How long do we have? He asked. She scanned the horizon with sharp, trained eyes. Not long enough. The wind shifted, carrying the low thrum of something deep, rhythmic, almost too faint for the untrained ear. Drums. Ethan's spine tightened. He hadn't heard those since he was a boy. Most white men mistook them for war drums. Nayeli shook her head. Not war, she said softly. Warning. But warnings in the West were rarely gentle. She turned to him then, urgency replacing every trace of exhaustion. You must decide now. My people will not understand a man offering shelter to a widow unless she is his wife. Ethan swallowed. And if they think I forced you? Her expression didn't change. Then you die first. The wind whispered dry through the yard as Ethan stared out toward the drums. He wasn't afraid. Fear wasn't something he carried. But caution, yes, and a slow-burning worry that this moment was larger than either of them. You can leave, he said quietly. Ride out the back trail. I'll tell them. They will know. She interrupted. They always know. Her voice softened. A woman cannot flee her grief, and men on horseback cannot outrun the truth. Ethan let out a breath that felt older than his body. So then what happens when they arrive? Nayeli hesitated just for a heartbeat. It depends on the truth we give them. He studied her, the straightness of her back, the stillness of her eyes, the bruise on her cheek that she carried without flinching. Outside. The drums grew louder, slow, steady, approaching. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Nayeli, have I wronged you by letting you in? She blinked, taken by the question. No, she whispered. You showed respect. That is rare. The drums throbbed again, closer now, the sound threading through the yard like an approaching storm. Ethan reached for his hat, settling it low over his brow. Then we tell them the truth. She faced him fully. What truth is that? That you came to me for shelter, he said softly, and I gave it. Her gaze flicked away as though she didn't know whether that was bravery or foolishness. Ethan, she whispered, they will not accept a half-truth. He held her eyes. Then help me give them a whole one. Before she could answer, a shadow moved at the far tree line. Then another, and another. Silent riders, appearing like ghost-painted horses, braided minis, faces marked for mourning. Not dozens, not a war party, but enough. Nayeli stepped beside Ethan, not behind him. Do not speak first, she murmured. Let them judge me before they judge you. Ethan nodded once. The riders approached in a slow semicircle, horses kicking up dust that glowed amber in the late sun. Their leader, a tall elder with iron-gray braids and a hawk feather staff, at Ethan with unreadable calm. The drums stopped. Silence dropped like a heavy blanket. The elder's gaze flicked to Nayeli, then back to Ethan, then to the carving tucked in Ethan's pocket, as if he could see straight through the cloth. A long moment passed. Finally, the elder spoke in English, low and firm. White man, what claim do you make to the widow of Koda? Nayeli inhaled sharply. Ethan did not answer yet. He couldn't, because whatever words left his mouth next would decide whether this ending became blood or mercy. The elder's question drifted into the evening air and settled there like the dust around their horses' hooves. Ethan felt Nayeli beside him grow still, not with fear, but with the tense dignity of someone who'd been judged many times and had no more room for shame. Asterisk, what claim do you make to the widow of Coda? Asterisk, Ethan didn't move, didn't swallow, didn't breathe more than he had to. Any wrong gesture could be read as threat, disrespect, or guilt. The Apache riders watched him the way wolves watched a stranger approaching a den. Calculating, ready, Nayeli stepped forward before he could answer. Please, she said softly, in her own language first, then in English for Ethan's sake. Let me speak. The elder's chin dipped a fraction. Permission. Nayeli turned toward Ethan, not the riders, not the elder Ethan, as though the truth needed to be given to him first. Asterisk, I did not come to be claimed, she said. I came because soldiers burned the place where I lived. I came because I had no shelter. I came because grief leaves a woman cold. Asterisk, Ethan's jaw tightened. He didn't look away. Asterisk, she took another breath. I asked him a question, not because he forced me, not because he offered me anything, but because the world outside is cruel to a woman who walks alone. The elder watched her with eyes that missed nothing. Ethan could feel the rider's attention shift, flickering like candlelight, some wary, some curious, one or two softened by recognition of her suffering. Asterisk, Nayeli turned toward her people then, voice steady but threaded with pain. My husband died with honor. I do not wish to shame his memory. I rode far because the soldiers who killed him would not leave me alive if I stayed. Her hands trembled only once. Ethan wished he could reach out, but he kept his arms at his sides. Asterisk, the elder's gaze flicked to him, razor, and the carving, why is it in his coat? Asterisk, Ethan slowly reached into his pocket, lifting the rawhide bundle with both hands open palms. Respectful, offering. Asterisk, she dropped it. He said quietly, I caught it before the dirt could touch it. Asterisk, a soft murmur moved through the riders. That mattered. A man who caught a widow's carving instead of letting it fall. That was not a careless man. He held it out to Nayeli, but she didn't take it. Asterisk, instead, she stepped closer to Ethan, closer than she had ever dared before, and closed his fingers gently around the carving, his hand covering her smaller one. Asterisk, a gesture more powerful than any words. The elder's eyebrows rose the slightest bit. Ethan felt her breath near his wrist when she spoke, voice just loud enough for the riders to hear. Asterisk, you ask the truth, she told them. Here it is. She lifted Ethan's hand, still curled round the carving so her people could see. This man showed me respect. He gave me water, gave me fire, gave me space to breathe. He did not touch me. He did not claim me. He did not shame me. Asterisk, the wind brushed the porch steps, lifting strands of her hair. Asterisk, but you ask if I am his woman. Ethan's pulse hammered. Even the horses seemed to stop breathing. Asterisk, Nayeli looked at him for a moment, just a moment, and something unspoken moved in her eyes, something neither of them had invited yet, couldn't deny. Asterisk, then she turned back to the elder. Asterisk, if I am to be a man's wife again, she said quietly, I will choose for myself, not for safety, not for fear, only for dignity. Asterisk, a rider shifted in his saddle, uncomfortable with how much truth was being laid out in open air. Asterisk, the elder leaned slightly forward. And this man, does he give you dignity? Nayeli looked at Ethan again, and Ethan, for the first time since morning, reached out, not boldly, not possessively, but with a careful, steady hand. He touched the back of her fingers, a simple gesture. Asterisk, honest, bare, seen by all. Asterisk, Nayeli's breath quivered, but she didn't pull away. Asterisk, Ethan spoke then, voice low, rough as grit and truth. I make no claim on her, but I'd protect her if she asked, whether as a wife, or as a widow who just needs a roof. The elder studied their hands a long moment. Then he looked at Nayeli. Is that your truth? Her answer was a whisper wrapped in courage. It is. Silence fell, but it wasn't the cold silence of threat anymore. It was the shifting kind, the kind that rearranged the ground a new way. Asterisk, the elder lifted his staff. His voice softened. Asterisk, then we will not take her, and we will not take your blood. Ethan exhaled slowly. Nayeli's shoulders dropped, not in weakness, but in weary relief. The riders began to lower their weapons, but the elder wasn't finished. Asterisk, he fixed Ethan with a measured gaze. Your shelter is now known. Your choice is now seen. With that comes honor and consequence. Asterisk, Ethan nodded. I understand. Asterisk, the elder inclined his head, the closest thing to approval a man like Ethan might ever receive. But before he could speak again, a rider at his flank pointed toward the northern ridge, where another smoke column rose. Thin, wrong, not Apache. Nayeli's face paled. Soldiers, she whispered. And the fragile peace they had built in one trembling moment began to tremble again. The word hung in the air like a blade. Soldiers. The Apache riders saw it at the same moment, how the thin column of smoke climbed too straight, too pale, too disciplined to be anything except a cavalry signal. Horses shifted, hands tightened on reins, the elder's jaw set, lines deepening like cracks through stone. "They come fast," Nayeli said, voice hollow. Ethan stepped off the porch, eyes locked on the distant ridge. He knew that smoke. He'd seen it during border skirmishes years before, troops marking a point of approach, a warning to their own men, a place to circle and scour. "They think you were taken," Ethan murmured, "and they think Apache riders are circling my land. They will kill first," Nayeli said softly, and asked the dead what happened. The elder turned his horse, voice sweeping like a command through the herd. "We ride to the canyon pass. We will draw the soldiers away." Nayeli stepped forward. "Grandfather, no, they will chase you. They will chase us instead of coming here," he corrected. "This land is not ready for blood." He looked back at Ethan, no threat in his eyes, now only a shared understanding of what violence could turn into if left to men who feared anything they didn't understand. "Your shelter holds more than one life," the elder said, "but it is your truth that saved her today." Nayeli bowed her head, grief and gratitude tightening her shoulders. Ethan swallowed. "If you ride toward those soldiers, will you survive it?" The elder gave a tired half smile. "We survived this land long before soldiers learned our names." With that, the riders urged their horses into motion, hooves thundering across the valley as they disappeared in a sweeping arc of dust and resolve. The sound rolled away until only wind and grass remained. Nayeli stood there long after they were gone, her face turned toward the fading dust, her expression caught between hope and dread. Ethan approached her slowly. "You think they'll be safe?" "No," she whispered, "but safety was never what we asked for." He looked at her profile, strong, wounded, unbroken, a woman who had walked through fire simply to stand here. "What do we do?" he asked. She turned toward him, eyes meeting his in a steady, unwavering way. "We prepare for whatever truth comes back." They moved into the cabin. Ethan bolted the door, though both knew a bolt wouldn't stop a determined man. Nayeli removed the last of her travel-worn garments, folding them with quiet precision, as though keeping order in small things steadied the world when the big things shook. Ethan lit a lantern. The room glowed warm despite the cold gnawing at the edges of their thoughts. Nayeli sat at the table, running her fingers across the carved patterns left by her husband. Ethan sat across from her, elbows resting on the wood. For a long time they didn't speak. Silence held them, but not the empty kind. The kind that lives between two people who have both lost too much and still choose to keep breathing. Hours later, hoofbeats returned, slow, measured, not a cavalry charge. Ethan reached for his rifle, but Nayeli laid a hand on his wrist. "That is not the sound of fear," she whispered. "That is the sound of news." The elder rode into the yard alone, his posture weary but upright. His horse was lathered, but not bleeding. When he dismounted, Nayeli stepped out before Ethan could. Her voice trembled. "Grandfather," he placed a hand over her heart. "We turned the soldiers at the canyon. They fired warning shots, but did not press. They believe you were rescued. They believe the white rancher who sheltered you was defending his land." Relief made her knees buckle, and Ethan caught her before she fell. The elder looked at them, really looked, and nodded once, as though recognizing something that neither of them had dared to claim out loud. "I will return at sunrise," he said. "Your truth still needs to be finished." After he left, Nayeli stayed in Ethan's arms a moment longer than she needed to. When she pulled back, her eyes were full, not with grief now, but with a quiet decision forming inside her. She touched his chest gently. "You turned down every woman," she murmured. "Why?" He hesitated. Then, "None of them looked at me like I was human. Just someone to take or tame. And me," she whispered. He lifted her hand, pressing it to his cheek. "You looked at me like I was just a man standing in the dust, trying to choose right." Her breath shivered. "And if I choose you," he closed his hand over hers, "then I'll choose you back. No claim, no demand, just truth." The lantern flickered as the night wind shifted. Outside, the land breathed easier. the smoke trails fading from the sky. And inside that small wooden cabin, the widow and the rancher sat close, quiet, certain that whatever dawn brought, peace or consequence, they would face it together.